The outrages for any person of conscience in the United States in the Trump 2.0 era almost come hourly. Many warned of a constitutional crisis were we to find ourselves in this situation, and disappearing nonviolent citizens and tourists to for-profit gulags, while key cabinet members demonstrate no familiarity with the concept of habeas corpus. That ought to tell you something. That right is an 800-year history in the West. If poets respond to the thousands of these human rights violations and unconstitutional and cruel actions with rhetoric, it will get lost in the zone that has been, by design, flooded with shit, to quote a Trump supporter and former confidant. Rhetoric is simply an ego response to an ego act, and I'm partial to the poetics of Jack Spicer, who famously wrote in the 1950s that, quote, the muse is patient with truth and commentary as long as it doesn't get into the poem. It should also be noted poetry is unique among literary arts for being able to tap into the prophetic realm. In the words of George Quasha, the prophetic sense is affirming the oldest function of poetry, which is to interrupt the habits of ordinary consciousness by means of more precise and highly charged uses of language, and to provide new tools. Today we welcome four poets, all of whom are contributors to the anthology I co-edited, Winter in America Again, to discuss how they address current events in a U.S. America gone mad. They'll each read their own work, and after which we'll discuss how they avoid the pitfalls inherent in such efforts. I'll read the bios and introduce each poet. First up is Allia Abdullah-matta. She's a poet and professor of English at CUNY, LaGuardia, and the Graduate Center Africana Studies Program. She teaches Africana literature and culture, creative writing, ethnic studies, and women, gender, and sexuality studies courses. She writes about the culture and history of Black women and explores the presence of Black bodies and voices in fine art and poetry. Her chapbooks, Washed Clean and Blues Politico, 2021, were published by Harlequin, Creature, Hex, and Blackprint was published by THRASH Press in 2024. She's a co-editor of Winter in America Again. Poets respond to the 2024 election. She's published critical and pedagogical articles and serves on the Radical Teacher and WSQ Women's Studies Quarterly editorial advisory boards. She lives in Brooklyn, and she's our guest. Allia, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks, Paul, for inviting me, and thank you to my fellow poets who are here. So I'm just gonna kick in there. I always like to start with an invocation, so that's what I'm gonna do first. Only yesterday I was salty sweet. I was blue-black. I was blue-black shine in starry night sky. Savannah oak trees make me nervous. Something changed. Suddenly I was raining blood. I saw sun. I heard clouds speak, rain and thunder. I touched African rivers and spit diamonds. I changed. I changed how I ran. I changed how I see the sun. I walked to the river and spit blood. Some say this is good. Some say this is bad. I say this is sound and smoke. All I want in this moment is to smoke a sweet and tangy Cuban cigar and dance to the sweetness of Ibrahim's voice at the Buena Vista. I want to go to the shores of Tanzania and write poems. I want to weep until my pain turns pink. I feel like the wind is crying and she wants peace. I want to soothe the wind and feed her pink cotton candy. When I leave, I will tell no one that I may have hated the people that I'm supposed to love. When I leave, I will tell the world that the love of sons will save your life. Tomorrow, I want to be teal and black. I want to run down the street for miles, shouting poem after poem after poem. I want to ask Nanny if we should have stayed marooned in the Jamaica hills, never to assimilate. I am different and I am the same. I am blue-black, ocean water, and I am the color of water and sky. I am a Black woman and a mother of Black sons in Babylon. I am star sparkle. I am sunshine. So, next one is called Move. Move into the deep, red hot sun, uncovered, stolen bodies cannot be stilled or find stillness. Sweat, raw skin, blood, and flesh wounds uncovered. From picking cotton and tobacco crops, getting beat up and beat down from the tenant farms, sharecropping and credit from the general store. In winter, they leave the land, leave Ridgeland, SC, and White Plains, Georgia, shed southern black skin, and move to the Bronx and Queens in spring. And this next one is in a couple parts. Hattie and them. One, Miss Hattie drove a mean midwife buggy carriage, delivered babies in rural wood and tin shacks. She married at 15 'cause marriage is what country girls did in 1935. Left the White Plains, Georgia red clay and her midwife life to escape lynchings and parietal lobe headaches, a middle brain throbbing that lingers in the wind from too many bodies swinging on trees in the wind. Two, they came north for quick money. They cooked and cleaned, did couples work, lived in the couples quarters in Murray Hill and on the Upper West Side, stayed in the city, worked weekends, and escaped to Coney Island on Tuesdays for buttered popcorn, hot dogs, ocean mist, and saltwater breezes, rested their tired feet and caught their breaths on park benches. Three, they left Anderson Road and Sidway Place on a cold February Friday, drove for 3 days, slept in motels across the Delaware, Virginia, and Carolina state lines, south of the border, firecrackers and pork rinds, flying tiger truck stops off the interstate, dark country roads, Confederate flag poles, pecan farms, the Piggly Wiggly and peach trees. Four, she misses her mama and daddy, sisters and brothers buried south before the migration, brothers left in Pine Lawn and Texas cemeteries, the farmers, the seminary preacher, the doctor who studied at Meharry Medical School, the shopkeeper who sold penny candy from a yellow school bus in Far Rockaway. And five, can't sit at her kitchen window and see the corner of Sidway Place. Said she needs to go home, smell a Georgia rainstorm breeze, sleep in the night quiet, hear her thoughts alone and loud, songs, police sirens, loud horns, and bullets that pop, pop, pop. Thank you.
Oh, Leah, the love of sons will change your life. Yeah, there's a few things I have to say about that. Let's move on to our next poet. Dane Servine's recent books of poetry include 9-Volt Nirvana, Deep Travel at Home in the Burning World, The World is God's Language, Earth is a Fickle Dancer, and The Gateless Gate. Polishing the Moon Sword is another one. His work appears in The Sun, the Hudson Review Tri-Quarterly, Poetry Flash, and other magazines. He lives in Santa Cruz, California. His website is daneservine.typepad.com. Dane, a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Paul. And so great to gather, I tell you, right, with fellow poets in this time. I thought I'd read two very different poems. One is from the same series that I wrote called The Democratic Dreams of Animals and Gods, not published yet, but three of those poems were in the winter anthology. So this is along those same lines. I use a bit of myth, history, and the animal world to explore the same themes that we're all wrestling with as human beings. This is called The Good Old Days. In ancient Rome, class conflict spilled into streets and alleys till patrician and plebeian declared rights for all. The Senate established committees to draft them, etch on bronze tablets, erect in the forum for all to see. Empire, though, has a poor memory, and after people clamor for one bright tyrant after another, the bronze tablets disappear by Cicero's time. When the Gauls finally sack Rome, there is nothing left in the forum to mourn. The people have already given it all away. So that the challenge for me in that whole series was, like Paul talks about, was experimenting with a reflective and quiet, uh, contemplative approach to everything going on. And that entire series is devoted to politics. But I also find myself, just writing other kinds of poems. And so there's just one from that 9-Volt Nirvana, the newest book out. Because as a therapist, I served children and family for many years, and it's always the children that are caught in the middle. So this is called What Government Reports on Child Refugees Miss. When parchment was rare, a codex of 800 pages required the skins of 400 sheep, or goats, donkeys, deer, and gazelle, even camels, the hidden costs of knowledge. No, Eden's apple was never enough. When wisdom had to be inked, flawless, free of scars, scribes sought the skin of animal fetuses to etch the Book of Hours, used for worship in privileged homes. Now, the skin of trees bears knowledge forward, disposable newsprint, the ephemeral hieroglyphics of the digital, where not 1 ounce of blood is needed to make a story disappear. There are more children than ever who now walk the earth, each an apple, each with skin, waiting for a story, waiting to bear a world forward. Like now, as endless hours pass, invisible children discarded at the border, waiting for an Eden they may never see, there, beyond the shining wall, the shallow river.
Empire, Empire has a poor memory, huh, Dane? Yeah,
it does.
Thank you.
And we do too, unless we poet together.
Yeah, we'll have to follow that thread up. Jim Dodd lives with his family in a 100-plus-year-old house in Astoria, Oregon, above the Columbia River. Since retiring from elementary school teaching, he's immersed himself in poetry. His new book, Touch Wood, was published this year by Watershed Press. These poems are invocations and meditations on trees. His 2 previous collections are A Glossary of Memory and Another Shore. In addition to writing, Jim gardens, hikes, studies natural history, and tries to improve his Espanol. He's a co-host of a monthly poetry open mic, a volunteer programmer and producer at KMUN Community Radio, Children's Bedtime Stories, and participates in local theater productions both on and off stage. His website is jamesdot with 2 T's.com. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. I think I'm going to read 2 pieces, the one you have and then one I thought would be appropriate from what I've heard already today. This is from a longer project I'm working on called Summer of 75, but the poem's titled January 20th, 2025. When something is about to come into being, smoke appears. Crackle of meadows, treed ridges, rocks, water on fire. Red rises, red river, full flood, spews into ocean of blood. Red wave stretched high, higher, red wall of flame crests, curves, crackles, breaks. The eels burn, salmon char, crackle of deer flesh, mayfly, cattail, acorn, dipper, drown in the burning blood. My dog's whining, wakes me. This is more recent, early May. Morning, no clouds, east wind, tears loose cherry blossoms, showering pink. Evening, petals cling to dew on my shoes. Hours after sunset, horizon still glows, rusted, blackened blue. Thumbnail moon above Jupiter, below, Mars to his right. Why don't you self-deport to the red planet, Elon, and take your emperor along?
I love how we see the tracking of your mind there from watching the sky and then being reminded of
Yeah.
that guy.
But they haven't fallen out, so who knows what'll happen.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Stay tuned, I guess. Thanks, Jim.
And the next one is 5/2/25. First of 11 palindrome days this May, my daughter sends me, damn it, I'm mad. I reply, a man, a plan, a canal, Panama. What is the course of empire? Rise and fall, flat on your face. Canada and Greenland are not for sale. Lufa, a fool. Maybe when scrubbed pink, he'll see. He has no clothes. Scrubbed pink, he'll see maybe when Lufa, a fool, are not for sale. Greenland and Canada, face on your flat, fall and rise. Of course, the empire is what? A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. I reply, damn it, I'm mad.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
And our final poet is Lauren Medley, a counselor and writer from Comox, BC, published in several anthologies, including Winter in America Again, Cascadian Zen, Volume 2, Drift, Poems and Poets from the Comox Valley, Sweetwater, Poems for the Watersheds, and Refugium, Poems for the Pacific. Her writing can also be found in the New Quarterly magazine, Subterrane, The Puritan, and other places. She won the 2014 Islands Short Fiction Contest, and she lives in Comox, BC. Her new chapbook, On the Way to Clusums, forgive me if I didn't pronounce that right, is forthcoming from Watershed Press. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. You did good. Cluesums. And thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to read, I'll just jump right in. This poem is called Someone Not Me Has Fallen on Hard Times, with an epigraph from Jasmine Mooney, that Canadian girl. And the epigraph is, women lay curled into themselves, heads covered, looking like a room full of corpses. Hands to the wall. You sell holy water, hemp-infused nootropic. Seems shady. Sell seashells by the seashore, cognitive enhancers, mind turns. We sell cells. There's a game we play with fluorescent lights 24/7 and you wrapped up shiny side in. Emergency blankets from never taken camping trips. Hope parsed out on mats. From here on Earth, it seems the sun has turned its back. Taylor Stockton Local Journalism Initiative, March 13th, 2025, 1:29 p.m., the Yukon News. She's in a cell with 30 other women. Concrete icebox, not a hotel. It's the hum that gets you. No windows, no obvious poetry. Subliminal flicker of mercury-beaded hours pinched into glass tubes. None of the women here have a criminal record. They speak several languages, don't always behave, smell bad. Some have showy spikes of vibrant dark blue emerging from black calluses. Salvia granitica, blacken bloom anise-scented sage. Who knows? Some cells have real blankets. Some have bunk beds, plastic spoons, pregnancy tests. There's a communal toilet. We like to help, but empathy dims, hijacked by schadenfreude, Scrabble word for harm joy. Friend of narcissists, psychopaths, Machiavellians, and just plain folk doing their job. We are the dead. No one knows how long they will stay in the depot of untrackable human parcels. ChatGPT cites privacy over the miracle of names. The nurse at Otay Mesa offered pee bottles and God. Next stop, San Luis Regional Detention Center. Secure housing for individuals awaiting trial or serving short-term sentences. Shackled and chained to a middle-of-the-night movie reel. At sunrise, grackles wing above the Walmart parking lot. It's hard to miss their dark feathers, love of open spaces. Some invaders lie dormant for 50 years. Bufflegrass and stinknet have a shorter lag time before they fire up the Sonora Desert and make their way to the green heart of the city.
Pea bottles and God. There's a combination for you. Well, there's so many different ways that I could go with this, but Lauren, Jim mentioned it in his poem, this notion of buying Greenland and making Canada the 51st state, and you living in Canada, it makes our machinations in this country all the more real when things happen like that. But one of the things is that it's had one could say, a positive effect on Canadian politics, on the Canadian sense of identity. And it reminds me of something I read about 10 years ago where somebody said, everything Putin touches dies. And I think there may be a similar reverse Midas touch to the architect of all misery in the White House, despite all the gold he's put into the Oval Office. So any thoughts about the whole 51st state nonsense?
Mm-hmm. Oh, what I would say, I would totally agree with you. There is a real sort of energy around joining together provincially. We still have some division in our politics, but what's interesting is that some of those voices that kind of echo the current White House lingo, the name calling and that sort of thing. Most Canadians are not very receptive to that, thank goodness. So, yeah, I think as a country, we love the States. I mean, the States are our friend. This is not about pushing the States away, but it's about standing firm in who we are, saying stop, we don't like that. Don't go away, but stop.
Yeah. Allia, I see you're nodding your head, and there's a couple of lines I wrote down. One that I already quoted, but the other one, Savannah oak trees make me nervous. And, I could kind of see where you were going with that. But I also saw this thread of just responding with, or just revealing your own personal mythology to say, this is what's happened to my tribe. And so it kind of gets us an idea that been there, done that in a way. You want to unmute and talk about it?
So it's interesting because a couple of things, right? I think it's important that in the midst of all of these things that are happening is that we hold on to our significant historical and cultural identities. And I think that for my people, I'm African American through the transatlantic slave trade and families from both Georgia and South Carolina. There are a lot of my people's stories who still are not counting, yet they moved our families to be, and for someone like me to even be able to get, like a lot of higher degrees, right, in the 21st century. So I think that it's important to acknowledge all of that work, to acknowledge the class positioning, the violence, the trauma, and then the beauty, right, of being like, I really say that I'm an up north southerner, right? Like I grew up in the north in New York City and Queens, and my family was from the South, and we had a very Southern household in both on both the paternal and maternal side. So I think it's really important to not let the climate let me forget the things that I have to deal with that we've dealt with, right, as a particular tribe, but as a national tribe, right? Like the way, and all of us have to be accountable for what America is and has been and what we want her to be, And one of the things that's really important to me in my work is to keep that thread of the storytelling of the reality of our predicament, but also in that to have some sense of, dignity, pride, and hope around that. And I've raised three Black sons in America, and it has not always been easy, right? And so there's a part of me that still really believes that we can be better as a nation. And yet I want to acknowledge, our, I want to say blighted past, right? Awful past. I think it's important.
I remember when September 11th happened, one of the things that was said is, uh, and a Black person said it, is like, now you know how we feel all the time, right? So maybe a similar sense now with what's going on with Trump 2.0. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll just comment on that quickly. You see my last name, right? So I've been through it all, right? After 9/11, a name like mine was targeted a lot, in a lot of different ways. And sadly, history is repeating, right? And when I say it's repeating, right, it's the foolishness that keeps repeating, right? And this like we haven't learned from our bad behavior. So it's a cycle. And a lot of us in the community are like, yeah, okay, okay, we know already this is right. But then the reality of how people are being harmed. And I just want to say one last thing about that is that, I am not an immigrant, right? I'm not an immigrant in the sense of how that is defined, right? But I need to still care about what's happening to immigrants, right? The ways in which these are the same tactics, right, that have been used. And we could go back, right? We could talk about the way the Irish treated, or I mean, we can go back. We can go back. This is the same behavior, Japanese internment. All of this is the same behavior, right? So I think that it's important to not lose sight of our connections, especially if you're trying to be a human being and you think that this behavior is wrong towards anyone. And I think that that's a significant part of why I want to continue to tell our stories, right? Because to acknowledge that, we shouldn't be doing this and we can't keep letting this happen.
Let me just follow up one point with you, Aliyah. You talked about trying to be a human being. So if and we see this poetry in the community, is returning fire. He's the orange Mussolini, or any number of put downs. Does that, and I see you nodding your head. So I think the answer is yes, that this is a less noble gesture than something that I think was modeled by all four poets here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, I say two things, right? I refuse to allow my work to be jaded by his presence and what he's doing. So I don't, I might not head nod to certain things, but I don't want my work. I don't want someone to look at my work in 50 years and say, oh, that was just a response to what was happening. I want it to be in conversation with multiple, with multiple and layered responses. And I also wanted to always represent who I am as an artist and as a thinker. So I'm not for all of the ranting in that way. I do think sometimes a rant is necessary, but I think a rant has to be very strategic and not be like you. It's kind of like, yeah, I see you over there, bruh, but we're gonna move this way and we're gonna chart our way, our humanity differently. I want to quote Sonia Sanchez, right, who always said the poet is the creator of social values. And so, and looking at culture, history, all those things. And I think that we have a responsibility to be that way and not to behave badly because we're upset with the foolishness. Because it is all foolishness, right? We know that.
Playing the game at their level, right? Talking about those different layers and your own personal myth and history, Dane, right away with "Empire has a poor memory." I love that line.
Mm.
Talk to us about how you address this and the role of the poet in making sure that we don't forget our history, which is
Mm.
obviously being forgotten because Kristi
Yeah,
Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, doesn't even know what habeas corpus is.
yeah. Well, I think more recently, one of the things I've done is travel as a pilgrimage. And in that prior book you mentioned, Deep Travel at Home in the Burning World, I went with my wife through Europe and Morocco and did a deep dive into history and memory and found such a depth, frankly, and wealth of, I may be making some of this up, but in people I spoke with, the things I read of more recent memory of empire, mixing tribes, the toll of constant warfare, Protestants, Catholics in Morocco with Spanish and English. And then more recently, so that produced a book as my way of trying to understand and hold memory, historical memory. And just 2 weeks ago, we got back from another trip. We went to meet friends in Krakow, Poland, and my first visit to Auschwitz and to Birkenau, and then went to Prague, and then went to Berlin, and where the wall, still is. And specifically because I wanted to be in Eastern Europe. I had never been there. And I wanted to go to the land of autocracies, where, between Hitler and Stalin, after all the monarchies fell, these grand schemes for a different kind of life just turned quickly into autocracies. And to look back at my country, America, from that vantage point. So these little pilgrimages and the writing about it, I'm realizing have everything to do with owning who we are and remembering who we are as human beings. And when we would meet people, guides or just in parks, and they could tell we were Americans, it was astonishing to me. The universal response was one of concern and curiosity. Are you okay? Are you okay over there? And that was very, very heartening. But in coming back, I just realized not only are we such a tiny, in terms of age, young country, but we actively don't know or remember. When I was shocked in kind of a weird way at first, but it was very profound, standing in the parking lots at Auschwitz. I was not prepared for the thousands and thousands of people, many of them students from all over Europe, coming with these big bus loads. It was almost like Disneyland. It was too much. But once you got in, the sacredness and power became very evident. And later, one of the guides, whose mother was a guide at Auschwitz, and she took this on as a personal mission for her. And she said, students come from all across Europe, thousands a day, every day. And I'm sure some of them are just students and oh, we're on a field trip, but you could see the impact. And that's building memory. And I see Europe, not to make them all good, but after so many eons of warfare, kind of taking a little different tact towards this constant racism, warfare, fighting. And by comparison, I just feel like coming back to America, it's like, oh my God, people just don't know. The memory is so short. So that was one of the things I was recently really struck by, and feeling like I need perspectives of other countries and other histories. So I'm not just in my own little narrow storyland, of America, which is beginning to feel a little, not only shallow, but problematic, because we're not embracing the very evident histories, in our own country, like Germany, frankly, is. So anyway, that's just a little bit.
A couple of thoughts. I shudder to think what it would take to emulate Europe in that regard, to have two world wars on this continent.
Yeah.
No, thank you to that. And also the Mark Twain line, paraphrase, travel is the worst enemy of ignorance. So
Wow.
taking advantage of that
Yeah.
opportunity to really draw distinctions and to come back to a place of gratitude and maybe bafflement about how detached U.S. Americans are from this. And, Jim, I think about your position in Astoria, Oregon. I don't think you can get far enough away in the continental United States from all that's happening in Washington, D.C. and what have you. Do we have something going on here in Cascadia? Are we closer to being a post-national state and watching, in a way, eating the popcorn, watching this stuff happen? Or how does it feel from your perspective in Astoria and in your own life?
Well, it's a little of that, but it's also, hitting home. We have a Job Corps site in Astoria that just got closed, and you're gone, and by the end of the month, people don't have places to go. They won't have housing after that. So, we might like to be beyond it, but we're not yet. And, a lot of people are, we have lots of immigrants, and they're fearing for losing their jobs or getting sent out of the country and all that kind of stuff. So, in the future, hopefully, we can get beyond the empire and live with our natural cousins in much better, healthier ways.
Mm-hmm. We see isolated incidents on Twitter, for what's that worth, or other social media, of people fighting back against ICE. They see ICE come in, they post things like, ICE comes in and makes this big to do about these people being dangerous and having to be taken away, and yet it's the ICE people wearing the masks, the ICE people with the ammunition and the guns going into Mexican restaurants. What does it take? What's it going to take to turn this around? Does anyone have any idea of when the average person in this country says, I've had enough? Because it doesn't seem close right now.
I'm afraid you're right. It isn't really close. I mean, all people I know, my friends are aware and go to protests, etc. But, and we're kind of in a little bubble where we live. It's not there's Trumpers, but there's not that many, or they're not that visible. So I can't really answer that. I hope it's sooner than later, but.
But if I may, I think that sadly, it has to be unraced. Like I think that, I mean, I live in New York City, okay, and there are plenty of folks who look like, like y'all, who don't have papers. I know for a fact. I've come across it with students, etc. And so I feel as though because immigration is so racialized, right? It seems like it's not a me problem, it's a them problem. And I think that's deliberate, right? Because of all the politics of what that does to people and how that really race is still one of the main things that can, arm and disarm people, right? Like I think that it's used so strategically well, unfortunately, to create divisiveness, right? So I think that it really has to become unraced, and then, other folks will be more inclined to have a bigger voice. And I do think it's very hard to have a bigger voice. I also want to put that on the record. It's very difficult. What do you do? How do you do it? I'm fortunate to work for CUNY, City University of New York, and we have some very serious policies around who can come on, who cannot, and some of the things that other universities are going through. We're not having the exact same issues because we're unionized, and there are just certain ways in which they're protecting academic freedom for us. So we're still able to reach students using certain, text and to hopefully get them to think about being a part of shifting some of these things. But I think that's the big key that we have to recognize that it's my problem as well, even though it's not necessarily me in this moment. It's all of our problem. And sadly, it's a big issue around labor in the US, right? Like like who's doing all this work? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like I'm very far removed from farm work and sharecropping and picking things and like let's be honest about who's in the restaurants, who's in the kitchen, who's doing. I mean, it's just really so for me, it's still a really big problem for all of us, but I think a lot of people don't have that level of understanding of it. And that's why, the banning books and all this stuff around curriculum is significant, right? Because until we have this knowledge, right, like you're saying, moving around the world, there's this memory knowledge. They're trying to erase that memory. And so then we won't have, like a fully conscious, I want to say, mind and soul to push back in particular ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
reminded of Ezra Pound, who said poetry is news that stays news. So I think it is incumbent upon the poet to have that history and to be able to tell it in that way. You were about to say something, Dean?
Yeah, I was picking up on the labor notion, and if when I'm feeling occasionally hopeful, it's the thinking about the nursing arena, thinking about the skilled nursing facilities, thinking about the doctors that are already, certainly at the nursing and community mental health aid level, are being affected. And people may not see farm workers in the field in their neighborhood, but they know their mom or their parents are getting help or not in the nursing homes. I have friends right now in Oregon, post brain tumor surgery, wrestling with in home care and skilled nursing facility staffing levels. And that is already very quick. So if there's a positive side about that, that is close to home for many people, and particularly in rural areas or in, unfortunately, many parts of the country, that is already being felt. And that kind of came out of the blue for me when it was like I wasn't thinking about that. If I'm hopeful, it's that multiple areas of our communal life are already being affected in negative ways from tariffs and immigration and so on, and that there will be a quiet groundswell of response out of personal, feeling it personally. Because short of that, I agree, we have a terrible memory. As long as it doesn't touch me, who cares? So I had a friend who kind of said, I hate to say this, but every absolutely stupid, foolish, bumbling, cruel thing this administration does is having an effect somewhere in terms of people going, no, 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 no. So that may not prove true. But when I'm hopeful, I think there's more of that responsiveness brewing that may help us out by the midterms or in the next couple of years. That's when I'm hopeful. I'm not always
I
hopeful.
hope you're right.
Lauren, what advice do you have for poets who are, I've seen it in my own workshops of poets stuck. They can't write anything but Trump sucks or, the literary equivalent. What advice do you have? How have you done it?
Mm. Well, one thing that I was thinking about was that on a one-to-one basis, I mean, the poem that I read this afternoon, I chose to write it from the voice of the jailer rather than the jailed, and it didn't start out that way, right? It started out from a different perspective, and then I kind of sat back and went, okay, like we got to understand the other. We've got to like what's behind that? These are people. They also feel afraid on some level. Um, so for me, yeah, that's where the hope lies is I mean, if our life isn't immediately threatened, of course, that's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, if we can get past that kind of wall and get curious instead of judgmental. That's one of the things. And then the other, I think, is, I think these times, I mean, for me personally, but also I think for lots of people, that there's a real call here. And it's a call to show up. It's a call to show up, even though that might be uncomfortable because it's demanding something aside from complacency, um, to show up. And I think there's also a call for a spirit, to tune in beyond the silly behavior or the obnoxious and harmful behavior. But so that way of listening, where you're sort of, I think of it as think horizontally, the heart, the arms, the universe, instead of, just the head. Those are some ideas that I have. And I'll just share one more thought about that. There's a psychologist named Diana Fosha, and she talks about undoing aloneness. I think that's a big piece. And the transformation of suffering is really about undoing aloneness. And I think poetry can really help out there. I really do. Reading it and writing it. Yeah.
I can't tell you how much joy I had hearing you talk just then, Lauren, and seeing Allia nodding, just resonating so deeply with what you said. To have different people from my sphere come and be together in a moment like this is one of the great joys of my work, and it just is a moment I'm going to remember for a long, long time. Thank you all for being part of this. Thank you for the work that you do. I'm grateful to be connected to you. And I hope that you'll continue to be part of the work and that other people will join in and see what's at stake and see what can be done and see how we can be our best selves and how we can support each other in being our best selves as we come to whatever it is that's after this. Because as Jane Hirschfield said about Buddhism in 7 words, let me see if I can remember this right. Everything changes. Everything is connected. Pay attention. Right. So thank you all for paying attention. Allia Abdullah-matta, Dane Servine, Jim Dott, and Lauren Medley have been my guests today.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone.
And
Thank you,
each of
Paul.
you.
Thank you all.